Yeah, all right. So this is the OpenStack infrastructure project update. Hopefully you're in the right room. I think some of these people here might be hecklers, so we'll see how that goes. I guess to start off, we'll talk a little bit about the state of the donor clouds that we're consuming today, which if you're not familiar, the OpenStack infrastructure is run on donated cloud resources from some of our member companies and individuals in the community. They help us run on top of those. We're very thankful to them. Currently, we're running on a handful of the clouds. There's City Cloud, Internap, Limestone Networks, Linaro, OVH, Rackspace, and VexHost. That's not in any particular order. They're sorted by, by alphanumerical order. In the past, we've run our own cloud in addition to these clouds, but that cloud is no longer, the hardware is no longer available to us, so we turned that off. And we now are exclusively running on clouds that other people are running for us that they give us access to. So thank you to all those running those clouds. A big thing that we added this cycle, or since Sydney, was multi-arch support. So we've always been an x86 shop, I guess, simply because that's what was available in the clouds that we were consuming. But Linaro recently gave us access to some ARM64 hardware via a OpenStack cloud in China. It's a small pool of resources today, but we've proven that we can actually be a multi-arch infrastructure deployment, which has been great. We ran into a few things that we've had to update. In particular, we needed Uefi support for Disk Image Builder because ARM64 KVM VMs, I guess, only support Uefi, no more MBR in that space. So that was a good improvement to Disk Image Builder. Other users have said that that was handy for them because they'd been wanting that elsewhere for other reasons. Storyboard has seen an uptick in adoption, which is exciting. I think part of the problem with adoption in the past has just not been the critical mass there. So if you're not familiar with Storyboard, it's a task tracker and bug tracker that we're trying to make use of in the OpenStack community that addresses some of the specific needs that we've had, in particular, decoupling tasks from stories and allowing them to float across projects because we're a large multi-project community and things move around and we think it would be useful long term, so we're happy to see that there are more people kind of making use of that. And in turn, that uptick in adoption has increased the amount of bug fixes and feature improvements simply because people are interested, people are getting involved. Small things like proper UTF-8 support because MySQL is weird and by default you only get 3-byte UTF-8. We discovered that we were using the default and we bumped that up to 4 bytes, so now all UTF-8 characters should be valid. Private stories was a big one that projects had been demanding to allow for embargoed kind of communication of security bugs and stories. And then we've also implemented a new feature to enable some specific projects to migrate based on a set of tags, which will allow them to kind of organize the migration from the old Launchpad bug set into the Storyboard story set in a logical way that makes sense for them rather than just the default that we had been using. An exciting new thing is we've got an outreachy intern that will be starting, I believe it's next week. They're doing finals around now, and we're happy to see that they'll be joining us. They'll be working on search functionality in particular, which is another piece of feedback we've received from projects that are newly onboarded is that the search functionality is sometimes not up to their needs, and so someone will be working on that. You've probably heard about Zul at this conference. It's been all over the place, but like a year and a half, 2 years ago maybe, I'd have to go look at dates to be sure, but we marked Zul V3 as a priority effort for the team. We said this is something important, we need to get these features, we need to implement this, and in March, I believe it was March, we tagged the proper Zul V3 release, kind of marking that work as achieved and done, so that was a major milestone for us. It's been a long road. We did the initial cutover in December. We continue to have old legacy jobs that we migrate into the new system. We are running the legacy jobs with the same system. It's just a matter of updating them so they're a little bit easier to work with in Zul V3. We've released Zul V3 itself, and like I said, we marked that work as done. That was a big, I mean, it's always great to kind of accomplish something after you've spent quite a long time working on it. But then a big change on top of that is Zul is now kind of split out of the infrastructure team as an infrastructure project and is now its own top-level project in the OpenStack Foundation CI and CD focus area. We are excited for a whole lot of reasons. Pre-merge testing of test updates, that's a feature that our community has asked for forever. We weren't always able to, the excuse in the past was that the security aspects of Jenkins made it untenable, but with Zul V3, we've removed Jenkins from the system and we're able to do that in a secure fashion. Giddup integration is another big one because it's allowing us to test across communities. So projects that are hosted on GitHub, we can now do like integration testing with against OpenStack, all with speculative pre-merge testing. So for example, we're testing Ansible's OpenStack modules with Shade, which is an OpenStack project, so that we can make updates to either side, and before we even merge on either end, we know that we're not breaking each other. The job config is in a familiar language for many of our community members and users. Ansible is the predominant portion of that. There's secrets management, so if as a project you want to say upload to Docker Hub, you can add your Docker Hub credentials into your project as an encrypted secret, and then only your jobs will have access to that. We have some projects making use of that today, and it's removed the infrastructure team from a lot of these details of various services needing to be in the middle. Native multi-node jobs, so you can describe a job that says, I want this many Ubuntu machines, this many CentOS machines, all in the same environment, and then deploy your software against it and test it all together. There's the implied branch and job mappings, which simplifies kind of long-term stable support of testing. So you can have your job config in a branch, and that job config will then apply to that branch for the rest of time, which means we're not spending as much time backporting and making sure that stable is always working, because we can kind of leave it in a frozen state and move forward with the new stuff. And a big thing for our community in particular is there's now a simple and extendable DevStack job. So a lot of various OpenStack projects are extending that to do their testing in a simple way, whereas before it was very complicated sets of flags and Bash. Zul itself is relatively well documented. There's a Zul Sphinx plugin to make the configuration of Zul things look nice in documentation, so it's relatively easy to understand what a Zul job is doing if it's using the Zul Sphinx plugin. We've documented our jobs, the OpenStack Zul jobs, the base Zul jobs library, which is meant to be like as a global reconsumable library of Zul configuration. So it's not OpenStack specific, it's relatively generic. And then there's user configuration documentation in Zul itself to kind of explain how to go about writing your own jobs. So as I said, Zul is now a top-level project in the OpenStack Foundation's new focus area for CI and CD. One of the things we had to do to make that feasible from a hosting perspective was update some of the stuff we do for project hosting in order to host Zul and a few others now. We now have vhosts for mailing lists. So on a single mailman server, we're able to host multiple domains mailing lists. And you don't actually, if you go to one, you don't even know the other's there. But it gives each one a sense of their own community, but it reduces the burden and overhead for us to run those services. We've got web hosting for this as well. There's documentation hosting. And then another one that's important is the Git repo hosting. And it's a similar vhosted setup where the idea is it's a single set of servers hosting the Git repositories, but you don't ever really see the other community's Git repos. And we use Zul to kind of bootstrap these features, but there's been more recent projects coming on that are using them as well now. We're still on the TC top 5 most help most wanted. Help most wanted, I believe. I think that's what we've been, referring to it at times. In particular, we're looking for community infrastructure sysadmins. If you're interested in doing CI at scale and running these services in an open community, we are an open organization. People come in and can help us out. We have a list of specifics that we are looking for help with on our specs repo. if that interests you, feel free to reach out to me or any of the other Infra community members, and we'll be happy to talk with you about getting involved. And thank you for those who've jumped on board. We've had a couple new roots come on as a result of this call out for help, so thank you to them. It's been really helpful. Looking ahead, so that's kind of what we've done over the last 6 months. Looking forward, there's some big stuff on the horizon. The biggest one is we're still running Puppet 3, which was deprecated forever ago. We run it masterless, so the security surface of that isn't too bad, but the Puppet community itself is leaving it behind, so Puppet modules out there don't work anymore with our old version of Puppet. So we're looking at modernizing our config management, which will probably involve updating Puppet to a newer version so that we can then migrate to hopefully a more container orchestration-based system beyond that. It's just we need to get off Puppet 3 sooner than later, and Puppet 4 is probably the quickest way, and potentially 5 from that. Gerrit 2.15 adds a ton of new features. It switches Gerrit to the NoteDB database, which is actually it's storing all the review comments and things like that in Git itself. So this is kind of a major upgrade for us, but it will add features and tools that we want. There's a new UI, which is actually like the old UI. But we're excited about that. It's something that we want to get done kind of I think at the start of this next cycle coming up. There's improvements to the IRC bot systems. We use a lot of IRC in OpenStack. Particularly, we have a ton of channels, and Freenode limits the number of channels any one connection can talk to. And we hit that limit, which means we need a smarter bot system that can run on multiple channels with multiple NICs to kind of sync together all these different channels. We want to improve the multi-arch support. Right now, it's pretty basic. We're running tests on it, it works, but there's work that we can do there to make it a little bit easier to consume by more people.
Does that also mean adding another architecture, or would that involve other community stuff involving going, hey, VPC 64 is the thing?
Yeah, so the question was, does that involve adding more architectures, or what's involved there? I don't think it'll involve adding more architectures. There's been rumblings at times of power being involved, but I haven't heard anything serious. It's more adding resources there and making them more stable. I think on both sides we're finding out that all of the software on ARM doesn't work as well as maybe x86, at least the stuff we're using. And I think a large part of that is simply people haven't been using ARM for this stuff very much, right? It's a matter of kicking the tires on that and improving. And then Zul was an OpenStack infrastructure project. It shifted out of the infrastructure project and moved into the top level OpenStack Foundation focus area. There's potential that other infrastructure projects or tasks may do similar shifts because of the CI/CD focus area overlapping a bit with what the infra team does. Yeah, like I said, if you're interested in working with us or just generally interested in what we do, have questions about how gating works or Zul, feel free to reach out to us. We're on Freenode. Like I said, we use a lot of IRC. It's #OpenStack Infra. We have a mailing list, which is not the busiest mailing list, but it's fairly active. We do respond there and try to keep up to it. We're always happy to work with people in person. There's the PTG coming up in September. We will be there. We're here at the summit. And then there's our documentation. This is the main system documentation, which if you're interested in doing sysadmin type tasks, that's kind of the jumping in point. It describes the systems we run, how they're configured, the documentation for that specific application itself, and so on. So yeah, I guess I don't think I ran over time or anything. Yeah. So yeah, happy to answer questions if people have them. Or Stephen already asked his question. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Do you already have a plan for the upgrade on the Puppet side?
Yeah, so the question is, do we have a plan for the upgrade on the Puppet side? Right now, there's a set of specs that kind of propose 3 major processes that we might take. And I think what we've largely decided on doing is we need to convert that into a single narrative that explains kind of the short to long-term progression, because I think we'll end up doing a Puppet through to container deployment journey. It won't be quick though, and that's why it's kind of split up in that way today. There's definitely chunks that we want to consider as probably distinct steps at different points in time. So there is a rough plan for the Puppet specific part, which involves getting from Puppet 3 to Puppet 4, so that we're kind of in a modern Puppet space where the Puppet modules will work. But then beyond that, I don't believe we have a specific plan for anything beyond that. All right. If there aren't any other questions, I will call it. Well, thank you.